What this video clip will look at is the Krebs Cycle and Electron Transport System. Use this in helping you understand this idea. It is physiology and it is a process. So make sure you get this down before going on to exercise physiology and or human physiology. You will go much more in depth and much quicker than what we do in this course. So starting off, what we'll do is let's draw an enlarged cell. Let's draw it very, very large. Say we have a cell. And outside this cell, we have a capillary that runs very close. And in our cell, we have what we call the mitochondria. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's where the good stuff takes place. And looking at the mitochondria, drawing this really large so we have room to write. So we have a cell, we have mitochondria. Where good stuff takes place. What we want to do is to make energy here. So we're going to call the Krebs cycle or critic acid cycle, C-R-I-T-I-C. We'll call it Krebs, K-R-E-B-S, Krebs cycle. And I'll use K so I'll take up so much space writing up here. In this, we've got to think of it two ways. One is if we have aerobic activity, what we call anaerobic activity. Aerobic means you're able to deliver enough oxygen to sustain that activity. Anaerobic is you cannot deliver enough oxygen, or it's the absence of oxygen for that activity. So let's say we have glucose. Now put a capital G. Glucose is what we break all of our food down into. It travels through the blood system. If you know somebody's diabetic, you do what we call a blood sugar check. They look at glucose levels. You can be hyperglycemic, too much glucose in the bloodstream. You don't have enough insulin to break it down, so they have to give themselves insulin shots. Or you can be hypoglycemic, not enough glucose in the bloodstream, in which they have to watch their diet. Both can be controlled very well with diet, but some people have to depend on insulin shots because they just don't produce insulin. Let's get glucose into the cell. It goes into the cell by active transport. Go back and remember the ways to get in and out of the cell. Active transport, and once in the cell, it goes through what we call glycolysis. And this is the process of breaking down glucose and changing it into what we call pyruvic acid. From this point, we can take either an aerobic pathway, meaning we have oxygen present, or anaerobic pathway, oxygen is not present. First, let's do the anaerobic. Let's shorten this up a little bit here. A-N-A-E-R-O-B-I-C, anaerobic. This is the cytosol. It's like a liquid portion of the cell. Mitochondria is where all the good stuff takes place. Refer back to your cell picture for this information. You may want to have the picture of the cell up on the PowerPoint slide while you watch this, so you can shrink one down, be able to look at it, or even print it out, have it open your book, whatever you need. So anaerobic activity, we do not have oxygen. So lack of O2. In this, we get what we call lactic acid. If you take off sprinting as hard as you can sprint, you keep going, you keep sprinting, keep sprinting, keep sprinting, eventually it slow down because that's anaerobic activity. You're not delivering oxygen. You get that burning sensation in your legs. That's the buildup of lactic acid. The thing with lactic acid, we can get energy. Unfortunately, it's very, very little. So ATP is energy. We only get 2 of them in this. And heat. So we're going to have to do something with heat. You keep building heat up in the cell, you increase body temperature. Remember, if you're doing something running and it's a muscle, this is going on in every cell of the muscle. There's thousands of them. With thousands of them there, this is going on in every one. So this could be a problem. We need to do something with this. Let's put that aside for now. Let's come back and let's say we have enough oxygen. Oxygen is present. We call this aerobic. A-E-R-O-B-I-C. That's aerobic respiration. So pyruvic acid is converted into what we call acetyl coenzyme A. Don't worry about it, just know it as acetyl coenzyme A for this course. Acetyl coenzyme A goes through the Krebs cycle, and I draw that in kind of a circle because Krebs cycle is a cycle with multiple different chemicals in it involved. Once it goes through the Krebs cycle, we get 34 usable ATP plus heat. It creates 36, but we use 2 in making it. Just like here, it creates 4, but we use 2 in making it. So in making it, we create heat. But then, also in all these processes, in glycolysis, I'll do this in a different color. Let's use blue. Hydrogen is released through that. And over here, hydrogen's released. Hydrogen's released. Remember, the body does not like a change in pH. And hydrogen, a backup of hydrogen, will change the pH. So if we don't do something with the hydrogen, then it's going to cause a problem. So what we want to do is be able to convert hydrogen into something to get rid of it. And the best thing to convert it to is water. Remember, what's water? H2O. So in the bloodstream, remember, you also have oxygen. If oxygen is higher concentration here, it will diffuse over. So we have oxygen here, several molecules of oxygen, and then we need a way to get the hydrogen to the oxygen. So what we have is what we call the Electron Transport System. And I'll just use, I'll kind of circle and I'll draw an arrow just to kind of separate it out. ETS uses what we call NAD and FAD. NAD and FAD are two carriers. They will bind with hydrogen, or hydrogen will bind to them, and they will carry hydrogen down to water, down to the oxygen. Once it gets to the oxygen and combines, then we get what we call metabolic water. Metabolic H2O. So now we've done something with the hydrogen. We made it into water. Once it's made into water, it starts to build up in the cell. Once it gets more water in the cell, the pressure is higher in the cell than in the bloodstream, it will diffuse or actually go through osmosis and go into the bloodstream, be taken to the skin to sweat, be passed in urine, whatever way it used to excretion. And we'll come back to that more when you look at the urinary system. So again, this is one of those things that you'll want to watch this a couple of times. Be able to draw the flow chart out. If you want to use the flow chart in the PowerPoint, that's perfectly fine. It may make it a little simpler, or if you want to watch this a couple of times, draw it out with me as I'm doing it here. Once you draw it out a couple of times, then go back and say it. Write it out in words. Just for the purpose of this course, the biggest thing is memorize this. Memorize what's happening, memorize what's going on. We need to get into exercise physiology and human physiology. You need to be able to pick up at this point, boom, you have an understanding of the overview. And then you'll take it and break it down into very specific acids in the critic acid cycle, in what we call the Krebs cycle. And you'll break down into other things. You'll talk more about NAD and FAD. You'll talk more about metabolic water. And you'll talk more about lactic acid and some of the buildup of there and what happens. So these terms become very important, and the understanding of this process is crucial. So be sure to understand this. Make sure you go over it, practice it, watch this a few times, draw it out with me while I'm doing it. So watch it, draw it out, flip that paper over, draw it out again, say it a few times, write it out, and then practice without the video and see how close you can get to doing it all.